Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 2025 Prestige Global Meeting Sources Education Webinar Series. I'm Sasha Andreev, and I'm going to be your host as we explore today's topic, cultural self-awareness as a tool for effective change with Jesse Ross. Now, if this is your first time here, we're so happy to have you. And if you've attended a previous webinar, we are very glad to have you back. Now, we've been covering a variety of topics in this webinar series, everything from personal well-being to cruise ship contracting to networking to better communication skills. It's all part of our mission to empower our clients. Now, at Prestige, we have a rich history of offering comprehensive support for event planners, everything from site selection to full event services. We leverage our global network of hospitality resources to benefit our clients. Our commitment to you is integral to our success. And since part of that success is to stay informed and inspired, we've been reaching out to our industry friends to share their expertise on the various aspects that affect your professional and sometimes even personal lives. So today, we're going to meet one of those friends. I would like to introduce today's presenter, Mr. Jesse Ross. Welcome, Jesse.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, before I let you get started in your presentation, I'm going to toot the horn just a little bit. Jesse Ross is the CEO of Mr. Jesse Ross, LLC, a leadership development consulting company that focuses on enhancing communication and connection while addressing conflict management, culture, people development, and productivity in an intentional way. He's worked as a consultant, executive coach, and an international speaker who's delivered about 1,527 speaking engagements at colleges, conferences, corporations, and nonprofit companies. And that includes a large number of Fortune 500 companies. And based on that count, today might be presentation number 1,528. Did I get that right, Jesse?
That is right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm a little curious because you're such a prolific speaker. How did you get into speaking on this subject as your profession?
Thank you for the question. The weirdest story about this is I had no intentions of speaking. I had no intentions of even doing this. I worked at a foundation, and we had, like everybody, the typical HR training. A guy was reading the sheet off the screen, word for word, and everybody was bored. And I happened to say something about it. I had a person ask me if I was interested in doing it. I said no. Ended up doing it anyway and found out that I really liked it. And so now here we are 15 years later, doing conversations or having presentations to try to make it relational, try to make it engaging, but also try to make it impactful.
Nice. And what can our viewers expect from your presentation today?
Well, I'll bust the bubble, right? I try to tell people I'm very like GED certified, and so there might not be anything brand new that anyone has heard. I'm sorry to tell you that ahead of time, but because we live in a world that's consistently changing, my hope is that you hear something maybe new. Maybe there's a light bulb that goes off. Maybe there is some way that I say it that makes it click a little bit differently. And then I hope that people really just think about how do we serve each other? How do we treat people with human decency and kindness in a very diverse and continued growing world?
Right. Well, I'm excited to hear what you have to say because I think we can all benefit from this subject. And I want to remind everybody that if you have questions during Jesse's presentation, you can use the Q&A function that's at the bottom of your Zoom screen to message us, and we'll address as many of those as we can during the presentation. But one of the cool things about Jesse's presentation is that there's going to be some audience engagement. So the chat is open, and feel free to warm up those fingers because I have a feeling you're going to be using them. So I will be back after Jesse's presentation. I also want to remind everyone that we are recording it. So it will be made available for viewing on the Prestige Global Meeting Source YouTube channel in case you want to reference it or share it with somebody who couldn't be with us today. And with that being said, Jesse, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Sasha. I am going to share my screen. So if you all bear with me for 2 seconds. 1, 2. I tried to make that 2 seconds. All right. And just as a reminder, as what Tata just mentioned, I am going to ask you to add some things to the chat. it really helps if you all kind of just dive in with your questions. We will or with your responses. We will have some time at the end for question and answer. But I always like to start here. This is my family, these beautiful people. Oh my goodness. This is actually my wife here in the middle. She does look like a kid. I know she just turned 21 for the second time. But these are all of our humans, and love them dearly, and they get on my last nerves. I'll just be honest about that. But this is why I do it. If I have more time, I do kind of introductions. But wanted to show you a little bit of the places that I get an opportunity to go. We got our oldest is 22, and then we got my nephew who's in third grade, and so we got a wide range of experiences and emotional behaviors and all the different things that are happening. And as we dive into this, these are some of the things that I've actually learned a lot from them. So we're going to talk a little bit about cultural self-awareness as a tool for effective change. Now, I'll just give you a couple disclaimers. When I get excited, I talk really, really fast. I am sorry. I apologize. I was born in Jackson, Mississippi, but live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And every now and then people are like, yo, where are you from? It's just because I get going. I get excited. So feel free to stop me. Well, actually, you can't stop me. So you just got to deal with it. Sorry about that. All right, let's jump right in. Typically, I would have you go around and maybe partner up and come off mute. But because we don't have a ton of time, I'm gonna kind of lay the groundwork because I think foundation is really important, right? So when I talk about diversity, I'm talking about the who we count, the presence of difference, the mix. There's a mix of us that are on this call right now. When I talk about inclusion, I talk about the what, right? So who counts, leveraging difference, and then the result of the mix working well together. So it's not just enough that we have a bunch of different people with different backgrounds on this call, but how do we make it work well, right? And then cultural competency, I'm going to talk about the how. This is the developmental thing, things that we hopefully learn or grow, we try to achieve. And then equity is centered around systemic outcome, which I put in here cannot predetermine success based off who you count. Now, some people might not know this, but just because you have one person who's wearing green, one person who's wearing brown, one person who's wearing black, now we get a rainbow. It doesn't work that way. Sometimes we have to think about it a little more strategically. But if I were to ask you what were your definitions of these different words, we'd probably get 35 to 40 different answers. And I think that's important because we all have a different worldview and experience. I talk a lot about experience and exposure. So I got into this work centered around what we call other awareness, right? You got news feed, things that happen in social media, things that happen in the workplace, which then impacts our behavior, right? When things happen in the world, COVID, for example, it impacted how we gathered, how we showed up. Conferences were not as popular or not even allowed, but we never really talked about how that made us feel, how that showed up for us internally, externally. Some people loved not having to engage with people, and some people were dying, right? And so I'm just wanted to flip it on its head and just say, okay, let's talk about self first, then talk about how that impacts our behavior, what we do, how we show up, and then I press the button, and then we'll just leave other awareness over there. Sorry. I also, disclaimer, I have chunky fingers, so every now and then I press a button that I'm not supposed to press. Just bear with it. Okay. First opportunity for you to dive in. Do me a favor, give me a 5 if you have a high capacity to do one or more of these problems. 5 plus 4, 10% of 100, 3 times 7. Give me a 5 if you have a high capacity. No judgment here. No judgment. Got 1 5. Okay, couple fives. There we go. There we go. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Thank you. All right. Now, give me a 5 or lower. Give me a 5 if you have a high capacity to do this. How about that? -5. Thanks, Laura. I appreciate that. All right. So here's why I use this slide, right? When I was in high school, I had a favorite teacher, Mr. Cowles, and basically our engagement used to be like this. Mr. Cowles would say, "Hey, Jesse Ross, did you do your work?" And I say, "Absolutely, Mr. Cowles." Then he would say, "Did you get it right?" And I'd say, "Absolutely, Mr. Cowles." And then he'd say, "Did you show your work?" And then I would reply every time, "Absolutely not, Mr. Cowles." Now, I know it was very important for me to show my work, but the lesson I learned from him was not just, he used to always say, it's not just about getting it right, but it's about showing how you got there so you can bring other people along. So he would make me go back. I'd have to show my work, and then I'd have to go help other people. And so, yes, we might not have as high of a capacity around solving these problems. But I do think that sometimes when we're thinking about how we engage with people, how we treat people, how we continue to think about culture and how we like create a workplace that people are valued and loved, it feels like this. We learned it a long time ago. Everybody should know how to do it. All you have to do is, carry the one, put the circle here, whatever those things are. But it really looks a lot like this, where it takes us a lot longer and it's way more processed. And sometimes we might need a little help. And so I'm super grateful that you are here with me and I get to be here with you so that we can figure out how to do this together. So when this all looks, I'm sorry, I just need to show you this. You guys have no idea how long it took me to get these gears to work together. But when this thing all works together, here's what it looks like, right? We have a greater vocabulary. We have an opportunity to attract and retain more diverse talent, greater capacity to effectively bridge cultural differences, but also greater comfort with ourselves. And I'm really hoping that as we continue to talk about this topic, that you grow not only more comfortable with yourself, but more comfortable with having conversations that you might not have been used to or been exposed to. So, if I were to ask you, here's another part where I need you to jump in the chat. If I were to ask you, what is your role based off either your personal life or your professional life, how would you answer that question? Can you throw that in the chat? What is your role? What is your role? Friend, thank you so much. What else? Anybody else? Showing up authentically. Yes, being curious. I love that. Give me maybe one or two more. That'd be great. Being kind. Absolutely. I love that. Now, the question behind the question is what is your role in creating communities that you can be proud of, right? So, based off me being a husband, a father, a community member, a public speaker, an entrepreneur, a I think I said dad already, father, dad, same thing, a son, right? What's my role in creating a community that I can be proud of? And really, the communities that you are just, it's really just your circle of influence, right? The second question, what is your goal? Something that you want to accomplish. Do me a favor, type in a goal that you have maybe for the next 1 to 5 years, something that you want to accomplish. I will give you mine as you're typing. I want my kids out of my house. I really, really, really want my kids out of my house. I love my kids and I really love my wife a little bit more. So therefore, the question behind that question, right, is what will be better or different because of that goal? I think it is perfectly fine to have selfish ambitions, selfish goals, things that we want to accomplish. But all of us serve a purpose, we serve a role, as you just mentioned, that we are in, and that eventually we are going to not be here. We're not going to be in that position. So what's going to be better or different because we are here, because we set out to do that thing. So in my kids' example, I want them to get out of my house, but I want them to be productive citizens. I want them to go chase their dreams. I want to go visit them while they are doing the things that they love, right? And so it leads me to my last question. Keep touching buttons. I'm sorry. Come on. Leads me to my last question that says when I would go speak, and I'm very fortunate that I have the privilege to go speak to a lot of different people, a lot of different conferences, organizations, institutions. And I would really just ask the question, like, how are you doing? And anytime there was a positive answer, I noticed the trend. It was always around alignment with their goals. I'm sorry, with their values, right? And so I would say, "How is your soul?" And anytime it was a positive answer, they would say, usually it's because of the work or the people work that is in alignment with their values. They're doing work or working with people that fits their values. So if I had more space on here, I would ask you like, what are your core values, right? How do those show up? And if you want, you can type those in the chat. Core value of mine: integrity, transparency, and relationships. Those are the three that pop up. What are your core values? Give me a couple of them. For me, integrity shows up as I want to be a person who does what I say I'm going to do. I want to be on time. I want to be reliable. I want to be dependable. Integrity, transparency. told you guys I was born in Mississippi, and so here in Minnesota we have this thing they call it Minnesota nice, Midwest nice. It's basically very passive aggressive. Like people don't really know how to read you, and one of the things that's transparent about me is you know what you're gonna get. Like if every now and then people call me a word that starts with an A, ends with an E, it's not Apple. I know. I'll let you guys catch that. It was awesome. Get your mind out of the gutter. It's okay. No, every now and then I can be tough, but it's because I'm genuine about like wanting to make sure that people know the real me, right? And then the last one is relationships. My mother, who passed away when I was a kid, used to say that people are important to God. They should be important to you. I just kind of took it and rearranged it and said people are important. You should take interest. We're only on here for a short amount of time. I'm grateful to hear that Lynn's one of her values is honesty, right? That Laura, one of her values is assume positive intent. I love looking at the goals, right? I'm super grateful that the time we get is important to me, and I really hope is that it's important to you. And so I think that that's how we live out these values, right? That's just how we live out this work. If I were to stop the presentation right now, that's where I would stop and just say, this is how we do the work. Figure out what people, what their roles are, personally, professionally. How do we create communities that we can be proud of based off our responsibilities or the things that we care about? What are the goals that we want to accomplish? And the people around you, what do they want to accomplish? And then what will be better or different because we are doing those things? And then how do you feel about work, about life, about where you're going, about what you're doing? And if it's not positive, how do we help people grow into that? Outside of that, I could walk away right now. I'm not going to, but I could walk away and that would be it. Excuse me. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of culture and identity. And I'm going to actually throw up three or six different images, and I'm just going to ask you to put a couple numbers in the chat. Now, I'm going to start moving a little bit faster just because I want to make sure we finish on time. And this is the part where I noticed over time I start moving a little bit faster. Um, so three things that are always present. Three things that are always true for me. Sorry. Identity is always present, culture always matters, and there are multiple choices. Say that again. Identity is always present, culture always matters, and there are multiple choices. So we have six images on the screen. To the top left, we have what we're calling protesters. To the top middle, we have a sign that says Black Lives Matter. To the top right, we have a someone holding a sign that says Me Too. To the top bottom right, forgive me, bottom right, we have two people holding up two fingers, which stands for love, peace, harmony. From the bottom middle, we have someone holding a sign that says no wall, no ban, hashtag resist. And then to the bottom left, we have a sign that says all gender restroom. Now, don't worry about this question in the middle, but I would love if you would mind engaging. If you could throw, if you identify with at least one or more of these photos, would you mind throwing a number one in the chat? If you identify with at least one or more of these photos, would you mind throwing a number one in the chat? Thank you very much. If you identify with two or more of these photos, would you throw a number two in the chat? Two or more of these photos, would you throw a number two in the chat? Okay. Three or more photos, would you throw a number three in the chat? Three or more photos, would you throw a number three in the chat? Thank you. Four or more, would you throw a number four in the chat, please? Four or more, throw a number four in the chat. Five or more, throw a number five in the chat, please. Five or more, throw a five in the chat. And if all six, throw a six in the chat. Finally, all six, throw a six in the chat. Awesome. Okay. Thank you all for participating. I really appreciate it. It makes my job so much easier. Now, here's the thing. If we had time, I would go around and ask, why did you pick the number that you picked without putting anyone on the spot? And I get the question all the time. People are asked this in this context, what do you do? Now, what do you do? That is really pertaining to the self-cultural awareness. Some people may identify with some of these photos more than others because of their experience and their exposure. And that is perfectly fine because we are all humans. We all have our own experiences and have been exposed or not exposed to different things. But I think the question is a little different. What do you do when you don't know what to do? What do you do when you are engaging with people and you're like, I don't know, I'm not familiar. I don't have that lived experience. And I think that's really where we grow. That's part of the self-cultural awareness that has really impacted my life. There are times where I'm not really sure, but I don't let that stop me. I try, like Heather said, I try to ask questions, right? I try to develop this posture of curiosity where I can go and just say, "Hey, help me understand, please," so that I respect you, so that I make sure that you feel honored and valued and welcome or whatever those things are. But also selfishly so that I can learn. I want to know. I want to know. I want to grow. And so I really hope that we can do that as we are thinking about creating spaces for people. All right. So culture, when we think about the facets of culture, it's really shared patterns. We use them to make meaning. It determines what's in, what's out, what's appropriate, what's not. And every workplace has a culture. Every family has a culture. Every neighborhood has a culture. And if you go or root for any type of sports teams, no matter what sports team it is, or chess team, or whatever it is, it has a culture as well. And then we dive into a little bit deeper when we think about this iceberg model, and everyone has seen the iceberg. I tried not to explain it, but at the tip, which we usually can see, are things that are easily identifiable, right? Cultural symbols, traditional dances, clothing, food, language. I have on a brown shirt. Sasha has on a yellow or green shirt. Clearly, my primary awareness is not working, right? There are things that you can see that kind of easily spot things. And then when we go deeper under the waterline, of course, it becomes a lot harder because it's not as identifiable. And it's not always in our awareness. The crazy thing about that is if you know anything about iceberg, and I've never seen one in person, but I cannot wait to go, is that what you see on the top, even though it's large, is way smaller than what's actually below the underneath the surface. And so, as we dive into this thing about culture, you and I have a lot of these things under the waterline. So, I'm going to talk about a couple of mine and then I'm going to move forward. But I just want you to maybe think about yours, right? Patterns of handling conflict. When I grew up, basically, my dad, my mom, and my dad taught me how to handle conflict by basically saying, if you, let's just say you're looking at the camera, if I'm here and you're there, if right in the middle, we're going to put that idea, right? You want to go skating, you want to go out to the park, you want to go hang out with a friend for lunch or whatever the thing is. You would put that thing in the middle, and then it was basically you better defend yourself. They would ask me every question under the book, under the sun. Where are you gonna go? What time are you gonna be there? Who all gonna be there? How you getting there? What if a tornado hits? I mean, the most random questions possible, because they were trying to teach me to make sure that I had an answer and I was prepared for conflict. Maybe conflict is not yours, but ordering of time. My dad, growing up, used to be late to everything. And I mean every single thing. And so much so it bothered me that now every clock that I can control in my house is 15 minutes fast. I really hate being late. Now, you would not know that about me if you just randomly saw me, but I can't stand it. I was actually here an hour before I was even supposed to be here, or maybe 30 minutes before I was supposed to be here. But I just don't like being late. I'm always 15 minutes early somewhere, or I will let someone know that I'm running late, which really means I'm on time, right? Because when I got into the corporate world, that's what they told me. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And it was just something that I kind of just really, really didn't recognize was underneath the waterline. See? Heather understands. But all of us have these things, right? And so eye behavior, patterns of handling conflict. The last thing I'll give you is that it doesn't matter if you grew up in the same place. It doesn't matter if you grew up around the corner. My wife and I grew up a mile away from each other. I know her sisters before I even knew her. And we grew up in completely different households. I told you how I like to handle conflict. Um, in her household, they didn't talk about anything. And I mean, nothing. And so two people who love each other get together, they want to get married. We had our first fight. I was excited and she didn't talk to me for 3 days. And I mean, I called her on the second day and was like, "Hey, what's wrong with you?" And she said, "I'm mad at you," and literally hung up on me. It was crazy because in her world, her worldview, it was we don't talk about conflict. We just act like it doesn't exist. And so I'd love for you to maybe just take 20 seconds and look at these words on the screen. Maybe there's something there for you that's underneath the waterline that nobody else knows. Or maybe it's something you absolutely know is a thing for you. And maybe it stands out, maybe it rubs you the wrong way, maybe you've never really acknowledged it, but maybe it also is not just you, maybe it's other people too. I have issues with social interaction rate. I love people and I like to go home and sit on my couch, right? Facial expressions, I make facial expressions all the time. They get me in trouble. I have to hide my face. I have to really put my hand over my mouth. But some of us, even thinking about roles regarding sex, age, class, occupation, and kinship, attitudes toward the dependent, incentives to work, we all have different things that are below the waterline. And I'm really hoping that as we think about it, we recognize if it's a thing for me, then somebody else might also have a thing, which then helps us be more compassionate, hopefully have more empathy, and hopefully recognize that while we are in this thing called life, there are things that we cannot see and there are things that we can see. How do we show up for people no matter if we can see them or not? All right, I'm gonna keep moving. Culture, we learn it from our people. Do me a favor, anybody willing to share where are you from? Like, where's home? Now you might live somewhere, you can put that in there too, but like where are you from? I'm just really curious. We got Minnesota, love it. Where at in Minnesota? We got Florida. Where at in Florida? Puerto Rico, Champlain. Okay. Russia originally. That's what I'm talking about. Farmland, Iowa. I love that. That was a loaded question, Laura. I'm so sorry. I know every time. Okay, but you live in Toronto. Okay, got it. Outside of DC. Ginger, I'm coming to DC in a couple weeks. Let me stay focused. I'm sorry. My son goes to Howard, by the way. Okay, so you grew up somewhere, right? No matter where you were, West Coast, out of the country, different country, you grew up in a place and that has its own culture, right? And then you were in a household, right? How many of you all do me a favor? How many siblings do you have? Or if you were only child, you can just put zero. But some of us or siblings have siblings. Some of us were only child. Some of us loved having siblings. Some of us couldn't stand having a sibling. Some of us wish we had a sibling, right? And if you grew up in a household where there were more than one person, usually the roles or the expectations or the chores were sometimes shared, right? Thank you for having an extra grandma or parent, right? Sometimes we had to make sure that we took care of extra cousins. I have a nephew who lives with me right now, not directly my biological kid, but we take care of him. He's my kid. And so there are expectations that we grew up that created culture. Then you go out into the neighborhood, right? There are things that happen. We used to play kickball on the four corners of the street. Cars would come by, and it was like we didn't even think that they existed. Never thought about danger, right? Some people grew up in farm towns. Some people grew up in a city life. It doesn't matter where you are. You learn that from your neighborhood. Then we get a little bit broader into your extracurricular activities or your after school programs or sports clubs, chess clubs, fine arts. Then we have other subcultures that sometimes come in no specific order. We learn our culture from our people. And again, every organization has a culture, every conference has a culture, every entity has a culture. So here's the last thing I will ask you to do, which will probably take us a little bit longer than I would like, but we're gonna make this work, and I might ask for an extra 3 minutes. I would love for you to list 5 aspects of your identity and throw them in the chat if you can. Now, my only caveat is if you could, I'd love for you, let's just say you're gonna put age down. I'd love for you to put either the actual number, I know, just roll with me, either the actual number or your generation, right? If you say economic level, maybe you say middle class, poor class, underclass, missing class. I don't know what that is. If you say nationality and you have multiple nationalities, maybe you put those. Maybe you speak multiple languages. Whatever 5 that you pick, I'd love for you to be as specific as possible. And here's the catch: you only got like 30 seconds. I'm sorry. Ginger's already on it. Thank you so much. Give you a little motivation music that I should have had queued up. Awesome, awesome. Okay. Now, here's what we're gonna do. Thank you so much. Look at all of you participating. This is amazing. I love when people participate and I don't have to try to bribe you. I appreciate that. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna ask you to scratch off two if you are willing. I know I've been doing this for a really long time. Nobody likes doing it. I get it. If we were off mute, I'd hear all the hms and ahs and deep breaths and sighs. I know. I'm sorry. Do me a favor, take off two and then either put your three in or write out the two that you took off. I like that. Thank you so much. Also, okay. Love it. Love it. Do me a favor and either so take scratch off two, so you only have three left. The question I typically ask people is what three did you leave on or what two did you take off? Got it. Okay. Thank you very much. I'll give you maybe 10, 15 more seconds for that. I hear you, Abby. I hear you. Lisa, curious when you say family column for the role, is that like based off your family role, or does it mean something else for you? And farm girl, love it. Okay. All right. Got it. Okay. All right. Now, I'd love for you to scratch off one more so you only have two left. And I know picking two is not always easy for people, but just bear with me for a quick second. I promise you I'm going somewhere. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Love that. Prestige, technically, that's four, but I'll let you slide. Community member, blended family member. I love that. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Now, here's the thing. Now, this is just an exercise, but I found this to be very intriguing when I first experienced this. So I asked you to list five aspects of your identity. You probably could have listed 20 if I would have gave you enough time. If and then I asked you to take off two of your identities, and you did. And maybe it was a lot easier for some, and maybe it was easier for others. If I would have had time, we'd have asked more questions about that. But um, and then I asked you to scratch off one more, so you only have two left. And I'm sure, because I can't see you, but there's somebody who did not do it. Actually, if you did not do it and you were like, I'm not doing that, just go ahead and type me. No judgment. I'm usually that person. Totally understand. What I learned when I went through this exercise for the first time in my life, I was just like, wow, look how easy it was when somebody just asked me to, excuse me, take off parts of my identity. I just did it. Right. And then I started processing what I was thinking about when I did, what I wrote down first, all these different things. The other part, what was more mind blowing was that how many times have I been asked to take off parts of my identity when I didn't like it, but I went with it anyway. I just think about it every single day, very often. The other thing that was mind blowing to me, which really hit me hard, was how many times have I, how many times have I asked people to take off parts of their identity, whether it was intentional or not? And most times I feel like it's unintentional that I have asked people to take off parts of their identity. I've asked them maybe to not talk as loud. I've asked them maybe to talk louder. I've asked people to maybe show up and abide by the dress code that we've had to work with that was established by somebody way before I even got there, right? I've asked people to respond in a timely manner. I've asked people to do this or do that and not knowing the full story of what's below the waterline. And yet, I still say that I want to be a person who values people, who loves people, and is very aware. And so there's always more context, right? And it's always thinking about that progress of how we show our work. Now, I'm not going to ask you to do what I normally do, but I would normally ask people for the sake of the exercise to scratch off one more so you only have one left. But the reason why I would ask people to do that is not for the sake of just continuing and figuring it out and making you scratch off parts of your identity. Usually, the two to three or one that's left is usually the part that's probably most important to you in this moment, right? Based off the exercise. The question behind that, though, is how many people know that, right? So for me, I always get stuck between dad and African American because those are very integral into who I am. I love being a dad, love it. I also love being an African American man. So that's technically three, I guess. And so at any given point, depending on what room I'm in, that might show up differently for me. And I know it shows up differently for you. If it shows up differently for me, and when it shows up differently for you, I know it shows up differently for other people. And my hope is that we allow people to show up as themselves, that we do our own work, that we grow in the ways that we need to grow, but we also create the communities that we can be proud of. So we help people be able to show up the way that they want to show up and they can be proud of that. All right. I got a couple more minutes. I got a couple more things to get through, and then I will leave you alone. So we got target identities and agent identities. Basically, as we were listing these things, I started recognizing, I started trying to figure out how to shape this into something, right? A target identity is basically when you experience one of those identities as being an outsider, a marginalized community, or whatever that might be. You don't have access to resources or power. And agent identity is the exact opposite. You do have access. You are part of the inside. You're part of the majority. What we know about members of underrepresented groups is they tend to focus and be much more mindful of their target identities and minimize aspects of agency. My hope is that, again, we, as the humans as we are, we continue to maximize our agency and also help people maximize their agency. We do that by making people feel valued, making people feel seen, they feel heard, they feel like they are important part of what we do. And that goes not just from our clients, not just our customers, not just our constituents, but the other C that I think sometimes we forget about, our coworkers. Our clients, our customers, our constituents, and our coworkers. All the C's matter as we continue to figure out how to grow into this. So, I'm gonna skip this slide only because I have questions later, and I'm almost wrapping up. I got maybe 3 or 4 more minutes. Ideally, when we're working through this, and this is like a 90-minute presentation I normally do in 35 minutes. So bear with me. The idea of where we want to get to is what's called adaptation. This is taken from something called the IDI, the Intercultural Development Inventory. And basically, adaptation is having the ability to shift the perspective, right? So we increase our cultural awareness. We have more empathy. We have more ways to analyze what's happening while not losing our own identities, right? So as the things that you listed, you don't lose those. You don't assimilate into something else. You become more aware and more conscious and more, expanded vocabulary. So we are able to communicate, we're able to shift our behavior, but we stay ourselves. And then inside the organizations that we work with, our hope is that we create more culturally responsive policies and practices. I saw somebody put in there about that handbook every day. Listen, the handbook hopefully speaks to us as we develop into adaptation. So it's goal-oriented behavior, and it's always influenced. Adaptation is always influenced by context, nature of relationship, and power dynamics. Now, here's the thing: you don't have to take an assessment in order to get here. You don't have to go back to school in order to get here. All you have to do is continue to do the stuff that we did today. How do you recognize where you are? How do you recognize what your role is? What is the goals that you want to accomplish, and how you feel about the work that you're doing? If you feel like there's more work to be done, let's do more work. If you recognize that there are natures of relationship that play into the dynamics of how we interact with our clients, our customers, our coworkers, and our constituents, then we're better off, or better, we have a better way of handling the things that come up when they come up. Because yes, as my as my wife says all the time, life is just going to keep life. So here are some questions that I leave people with, and this group of questions are centered specifically around microaggressions, right? What are some challenges in addressing microaggressions? What do you do if you watch someone experience a microaggression? What is the protocol for said behavior? Hopefully, those are in your policies. And then thinking about, the exercise. What ways have you made others feel comfortable or uncomfortable? Second set of questions, and I know I'm moving fast, so I apologize. What are some challenges in being adaptive in intercultural situations? We talked about a lot in a very short amount of time, but all of us have a culture. All of us have multiple cultures. Identity is always present. Culture always matters. There are multiple choices. What are some strategies or support systems that you can use to help you? I really hope that as a group, as we're doing these webinars, these are strategies and support systems to help you. This is why we put on these educational webinars to help you navigate things in your world, a variety of things. What are you willing to acknowledge happened, didn't happen? Listen, everybody has been present or around when something happened and it should have, and you noticed it. And when you noticed it and said, hey, I'm sorry. I know that this was supposed to happen and it didn't. And, that sucks. That person who experienced it felt seen, felt heard, felt valued. So maybe there's an opportunity to do that. What are you willing to commit to? Feel like that's self-explanatory. And then what are some of your challenges in addressing conflict or apologizing? I have learned, especially given the time that we are in right now, we have a really hard time apologizing because we are taught that we are supposed to be right, that that's the goal. And I just feel like the more um, humbleness that we create and the more posture of empathy that we can build into our staff, into our clients, and all the other C's, as well as children, I would say, it gives us an opportunity to hopefully learn versus try to prove that we are right. So as I wrap up, I'm just really curious, are there things that have resonated with you? I know, again, we went through a lot in a short amount of time. Hopefully you are still here and present. Are there ahas or takeaways? I always like to know if there's something that I said, again, that maybe the light bulb went off, maybe somebody said something that that you liked, or I said something that you liked. And then maybe there's some things that are lingering. Maybe you have questions. You might even have complaints. I don't know if it's appropriate to take those, but we do have a survey coming out. But I would really love to hear where you are. And Sasha, I'm actually going to invite you back to maybe feel some of those questions that might have come up that I was moving too fast and I might not have been able to see.
Sure. Well, thank you. And the chat is still open, so I know that if there are questions, let's just stick with the chat because everyone's using it. But I'll field some of those really quick out loud. What have you done to make someone uncomfortable? Uncomfortable. I realize it's the same answer. I asked question, which is a really great way to start. Love the simple way of explaining the underwater differences between people. Is something that came from uh, one of our folks at Prestige. And since you took that slide down, if you want to ask those questions one more time, just so people have a chance to think about them.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. What resonated with you? Are there any ahas or takeaways? And what's still lingering?
Yeah, we'll give people a chance to respond. It's interesting as people are writing. Maybe as I was listening to Jesse, uh, I think probably a big challenge is that when we go into a workspace or really anywhere, we bring our identity and our culture and what's above the water and what's beneath into that room. And when you
Hmm.
asked, what have we done in order to essentially diminish someone's culture in order to fit in?
Hmm.
How do you resolve trying to fit into the culture of a workplace without having to dilute or sacrifice or compromise the things that are important to us? I'm assuming that that's a challenge that is always there, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's always there. And I think the thing that is hard, uh, and I say this with a grain of salt because I know that there are a lot of different diversity dimensions given in the chat here present. And so this is not a fix, but it's the way that I have understood it is the more I have done my own work, it has been a lot easier for me to show up the way that I want to show up
Mhm.
because a lot of that stuff is definitely outside kind of coming in. And then I've been programmed and then I've tried to deprogram and then I've tried to reprogram and maybe there's other versions of that. But I also have learned that the more comfortable I've become with myself, the easier it has been to not allow people to scratch off parts of my identity or suppress parts of me. I always tell people like, hey, what you see is what you get. Right. And even in a hiring process, sometimes it's like, hey, I just want you to know who you're hiring or who we're engaging with, who we're working with. I try to keep those things, those three things that I mentioned before: integrity, transparency, and relationships. I try to say those in every interaction I have with new people so that they get a really good picture, even if it's a short amount of time, of who they're getting and who I am. But it's
Well, it's
definitely
about setting
hard.
expectations, right? Like that
Yeah.
way you're not surprising. And I just heard you said like the more comfortable you become with yourself, the easier it became to present yourself as who you are, because it
Yeah.
seems insecurity about ourselves probably affects not just how we carry ourselves into a space, but also how we treat others, because it's very easy to project your insecurity on others.
Yeah, and the hard part about that as well is it's really hard when people have projected on you. So then you now start to believe that you are less than or a target identity. When in certain communities that target identity is celebrated, right?
Yeah.
And lifted up.
Yeah. Lisa wrote, it was interesting how hard it was to analyze myself, which is true. I kind of was like, oh, this is deep real fast.
Oh yeah.
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 I do want to give folks, if you do have a question for Jesse, we just have a couple of minutes left. So if you want to ask a follow up, or if there's something that you're thinking about that you want him to comment on, this is the time to do it. So just put it in the chat. As folks are doing that, I did want to, like we talked about a couple of questions before we started the presentation, you and I, about sort of how to avoid cultural appropriation while being culturally inclusive in our projects in content. Because I think out of trying to be sensitive for other people's culture, that I don't, for the lack of a better word, like we can be performatively culturally,
Yeah.
condescending at the same
Yeah.
time come off the wrong way. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, this is a hard one because it can be really tricky. The first thing that I always try to tell people is if we're doing something that helps or that is trying to uplift a certain culture, then the first step should always be to go to someone as a trusted resource from that culture. Therefore, we try our best to avoid the appropriation of that culture. So, for example, during Black History Month, I'm just doing that because I'm Black. Um, I, I don't want a soul food potluck from people who don't know anything about soul food, right? What would be more helpful is if they went to me or other people who come from African American culture and say, "Hey, we want to do something. What would feel good for you? And where are some ideas? Or here are the ideas we have. Tell us if they're terrible or not." And so those are things that I think about. But I do think it's really tricky because you really want people to feel loved and valued. Nothing about us without us. Exactly. But not at the sacrifice of people feeling like you have one appropriated culture, but two, you just did something very performative. So I think it can be hard. When in doubt, go talk to people.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. Heather had written earlier that, this idea of like, what have you done to make someone comfortable or uncomfortable? I realize it's the same answer. I ask questions. So the solution is to ask questions. And also, like you said, be open to apologizing or just admitting that you are wrong, which is something you had mentioned earlier.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm super grateful. I always tell people, because I know we're getting at the time and I know you have kind of a closing. If there's anything that comes up, because something always comes up later, you can always feel free to reach out to me. I love these conversations. This is why I'm here. But I also love engaging with people outside of just the webinar or the training experience. And so if there's anything I ever can do to serve you, including you, Sasha, including the rest of the attendees, please feel free. And I really appreciate you for sitting with me and taking some time.
Well, Jesse, thank you so much for being here. I wish we had another hour, but I do want to
I
say, if
know.
you want to get in touch with Jesse, please contact your Prestige account manager. As you've witnessed, Jesse's presentation is so much deeper than what we had a chance to see. It was, in fact, the tip of the iceberg, but he does, in fact, provide himself as a speaker. So if you're interested in hiring him for your organization or conference or convention, you can also get in touch with him to your Prestige account manager, because this is something that he does quite well. Jesse, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been a huge pleasure.
Thank you.
And I want to remind everyone that, should you want to tune in next month on May 8th, we are going to be talking with Nicole Mararu from Hilton Global about the critical role of revenue management in the sales process. So please log in on May 8th and you'll be getting follow-up emails with that. Otherwise, you can always scan this QR code on your screen, which will, of course, take you to our full schedule so you can see what we have coming up for the rest of the year. And again, we love hearing back from you. So if there's a subject matter or person you want to pitch to us, or maybe that person's you, please reach out to your Prestige account manager. With that being said, it has been such a pleasure being with you today. I wish we had more time, but hopefully you will connect with Jesse and of course, broaden your understanding of cultural awareness with his help. Thank you so much for being here, and we will all see you next time.